Quackshot is Indiana Jones starring Donald Duck. Wait, I mean that's true, but there's more. Kinda. Quackshot starring Donald Duck is one of the Disney games for the Genesis that was developed by Sega. Now I always thought that Capcom had the rights to Disney games in the 90s, but it looks like that was only for Nintendo consoles. Genesis classics like Castle of Illusion and World of Illusion were developed by Sega themselves. This trilogy of Sega developed Disney games is actually really good. Just look at this for contrast. Fantasia was published by Sega, but they outsourced the development to Infogrames, who are probably most well known for this. Yeah. Anyway, Quackshot was later ported to the Sega Saturn in a compilation with Castle of Illusion under the Sega Ages line. I bring up the Japanese release because the Wikipedia page for Quackshot lists its Japanese name as Georgia O no Hiho, which translates to Georgia King's Hidden Treasure. Why Georgia? Is it because they didn't want to use Indiana? Who is the king of Georgia anyway? I'm gonna go with Hulk Hogan. You're not gonna find my treasure, brother. The story here is pretty simple. There's an ancient treasure and Donald Duck wants to find it because money. Despite his wife's nagging, Donald says, "Goodbye, bitch!" and takes his nephews Booby, Dooby, and Jooby on a fantastic journey to their hometown. Your goal is to make it through the level while avoiding enemies. Your main weapon doesn't kill them, only stuns them so you can walk by. Once you reach the end of the level, you find out that you need an upgrade to proceed. That's the game. It's basically one long fetch quest. While you do get weapon upgrades, most of the items are used one time to open a path, and that's all they do. So you hit the checkpoint in Egypt, get a key from the checkpoint in Duckburg, use the key in Egypt and get the red plunger, use that to progress in Duckburg, get a bubble gun, go to Transylvania, fight the first boss, and open up 4 more locations where you do the same thing. All the backtracking might sound annoying, but each level is divided into 2 sections by checkpoints so you can fast travel past the first area. Before I go into the rest of the game, let's just take a look at this. I always thought the game looked great, and in my opinion, it stands next to some of the best looking games from the early 90s. The HUD is simple. You have your health, current weapon, an empty space for some reason, useless points, and a temper gauge. You can see here that it's full because these goddamn fucking snakes are pissing me off. The soundtrack might not be as memorable as Sonic, Mario, or Mega Man, but each area has a unique sound that fits the theme of the level. I've always been particularly fond of this one. It might be just me, but I always felt like platforming on the Genesis was less accurate than on the Super Nintendo, and this game is no exception. I'm not saying it's bad, it's certainly no McKids, but the controls could definitely stand to be a bit tighter. However, the hard jumps in this game feel more forgiving than they look. Getting back into the game's progression, the first 3 areas give you your main weapons. The red plunger, which lets you climb walls, the bubble gun that can actually kill enemies and destroy some blocks, and popcorn. The popcorn is a limited resource, but it's the best way to take out annoying enemies and bosses. It's like the spread gun from Contra. Like I mentioned earlier, once you beat Dracula, 4 more locations open up and the fetch quest begins. This is the real meat of the game. There's a certain order you have to visit these locations, but even if you didn't know that, you can still go until you hit a checkpoint and back out. This eliminates a lot of unnecessary backtracking. In Maharaja, you have to find your way through a maze of doors and fight a tiger to receive the Sphinx tear. Logically, this would lead you to Egypt. Now, here you can see an example of good game design like Egoraptor talks about in his Mega Man Sequelitis video. First, you jump across these stable platforms, dodging this bit of fire at the end. Next, you run across a bridge made of falling platforms. The next section combines the falling bridge and falling fire, and it finally ends up with you having to jump across falling platforms while fire falls from the ceiling. In the next section, you run down a hallway and see fire chasing you near the end. You probably won't get hit by it and it lets you know what's ahead. This shows some potentially great design until this random pit of fire that you have no way of knowing about. Once you get past that, you're thrown into this death trap of a riddle. The only way to know what to do is to look at a note you got way back near the start of the game. The note is kept in the same area as the one-time use item, so why would you ever consider looking at it? Anyway, you get the Scepter of Ra and head to the South Pole after a pretty fun, kinda fun, minecart section. You use the scepter to melt the ice around the Viking key and then go to the Viking ship to fight another boss. This is the easiest boss in any game I've ever played. You don't even have to move, just jump and shoot. The Viking dude gives you a new plunger that lets you hang from stuff so you can go back to the South Pole and catch a ride on this pelican. This takes you to an ice cave which isn't really hard to navigate, but these guys are a pain in the ass. The only way to get around them is to jump over them, and they're about 1.5 times bigger than any other enemy. At this point we know there's a Viking diary in this level, but unless you go around shooting every ice block you find with the bubble gun, you're probably gonna miss it. None of that matters though, because as soon as you get out of the cave, this Peter guy kidnaps the kids, and you have to give them the diary. The next area is the hideout, and it kind of incorporates everything you've been through so far into one level. All of this stuff, and then this. This is so annoying. It's not hard, just really slow. I get it. It's a neat platforming section, but shit, man. The boss looks like he'll be pretty tough, but I barely had to move the entire time. I spent about 5 minutes trying to figure out how to get out of this room, but like the note earlier, you have to use the diary. The final level has some relatively difficult platforming leading up to the edge of this cliff. I actually had to look at a walkthrough to find out that there were invisible blocks, and even then, How would I have known this in 1991? Once you find the first one, the best way to get across is to jump, then turn around. At least this lets you see where the next block is. The final boss isn't particularly difficult, it just comes down to dodging these falling blocks. Once you beat him, Donald finds out the treasure is just a statue, and you can see on his face. Ah shit man, how am I gonna tell this bitch I left her behind to go look for a statue? But it turns out there's a necklace inside, so whatever.
I ain't saying she a gold digger.
Quackshot is an often overlooked gem from the early days of the 16-bit era. It's not very hard, but I don't think it's supposed to be. It's a beginner's adventure game. Like you would start off a child with this before throwing them into something like Super Metroid. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed revisiting this game from my childhood. Don't forget to like and subscribe, follow us on social media at CrashLove Gaming, and check out our new podcast channel in the description. Thanks for watching and we'll see you next time.